The other day, someone asked me, how many world quests did you used to do back in the day, Mike? And I went full boomer. 0. They didn't exist when I started the game. Yet now, world quests and daily quests are practically the entire game for many, many people. Where do they come from? Who did them best? And more importantly, what will Shadowlands do? Only one way to answer that. We're going to have to do them all. The reason we had to do them all is because our memory sucks. Over the last 15 years, of course, things are misremembered. I couldn't remember the layout of like the Shattered Sun Isle, for example. I could have sworn to you it was totally different. And recently, someone berated me because during the Legacy of the Warlock video, I pointed out that Warlocks used to tank the Striders at Lady Vash, and they played the Burning Crusade, and they never remembered that, and therefore, YouTuber is wrong! Wrong, I say! Although they are wrong. The point is, we often misremember things. We might look fondly on certain world quests and hubs that came into the game at a certain point, but a part of that might be because of who we did them with at the time. How were you enjoying the game? How much knowledge did you have? A lot of people think very fondly when they were newbies because they were getting wonderful gear so easy and doing all sorts of stuff that they could cope with. Yet if we go back in time, we actually think, this was actually pretty crappy. I know throughout this process, I've changed my mind about a couple of the world quest zones that are in the game. There's also another important issue here. The game is old. Imagine that a lot of the people making the world quest for Shadowlands or even BFA may not have even understood that world quests never existed. So why? Why do world quests and daily quests, which we're going to treat as basically the same thing throughout this video, why were they even brought into the game in the first place? Well, that's simple. They came into the game during the Burning Crusade. Now, I want to be clear here. Repeatable turning quests have always existed in lots and lots of games, especially RPGs. They existed in Ultima Online and so on and so forth, and of course World of Warcraft had them even in Classic. WoW Classic is out right now, so many of you know that reputation was typically gained by grinding over and over again, getting turn-ins, invader scourge zones, getting your feathers and turning those in order to gain rep. Now, rep and world quests and daily quests are inextricably tied together. There's no ripping those two things apart. So when they decided to think of some way of making this more interesting, daily quests were the solution. Lots and lots of players crying out that they were tired of grinding Timbermaws, or tired of grinding the same old mobs for hours and hours and hours on end just to turn in tokens, then go back out and start doing it again. Now, here's where things get really interesting. There was another big problem that Blizzard really did not want to address when they announced the introduction of daily quests in 2.1. They did not come out with the launch of the Burning Crusade, and that was gold. Gold was a massive, massive problem, particularly at the end of Classic. You might have paid attention to a lot of the hardcore Classic players, and what they did straight after Cap was immediately start farming gold for the rest of Classic in order to stock up on those coffers before anyone else could get up to them and start farming as well. Good reason for this. Gold is a real pain in the arse in Classic, and unless you had an abundance of time, being able to farm gold for repairs was a big, big issue. Lots and lots of my friends, including me, ended up with some bought gold at some point or another, and the reason was simple. I simply could not afford to raid anymore. As your gear levels up and it goes from greens to blues to epics, as it does in every single WoW expansion, then your gold repairs rise. They rise exponentially. As Classic got more accessible with the introduction of ZG, AQ20, and then more people going into Molten Core, suddenly what we saw was a lot of the casual player base who had been sat in blues for the longest time, suddenly having full epics very, very quickly. And what they also noticed is that they could no longer afford to repair their gear, let alone buy consumables, buying potions and things along those lines. This meant that some people, and I don't mean a few, quite a lot of people, had to stop doing the thing they enjoyed in World of Warcraft in order to farm gold, or buy it. It was becoming an increasing problem over the course of the entirety of vanilla, was people just buying gold so they could play. Blizzard needed to do something. So, with the launch of TBC, everything reset. Because I know you're thinking, Mike, why didn't they bring daily quests in with the launch of TBC in order to fix this gold thing? We all went back to clown suits. Yes, we all went back to clown suits. Clown suits, very cheap to repair, but very, very quickly, certainly by patch 2.1, people were starting to get all that good gear again. Repair costs were starting to skyrocket. The gold sellers were now finding their business once again. Big issue. daily quests were the solution. And they came in a really nondescript way. At this point, we need to talk about the idea of mandatory versus optional. Everything involving rep grinding, pretty much, in Classic, is optional. If you want that Timbermoor rep, you want that Silithus rep, it's optional. It's pretty good, but it is optional. It rewards you with mounts, some basic gear. Nothing in the game requires you to do it. Now, in TBC, they started to walk a fine line which would define the rest of the Burning Crusade. Of course, to enter heroic dungeons, you were mandatorily required to gain Revered. That also unlocked the entire quest lines for doing Karazhan, and if you're a raider, this would lead you onto Magtheridon's Lair and Tempest Keep, all part of the quest line that all revolved around this mandatory reputation. But they gave you the choice, and this is where Blizzard kind of falls down for me as we move forward in this timeline. Because they knew it was mandatory, they gave you a couple of ways of going about it. You could either do the storyline in the entire zone. If you did every quest, you would be pretty much revered, certainly if you included the dungeon quest. Or you could just grind dungeons. If that was preferable to how you wanted to play, you could do that. Not only that, you only needed Revered, not Exalted. Once you got Revered, you gained access to doing stuff, and that was your way to go. Exalted provided some really good upgrades, but at that point, you could focus on the one you wanted. If you wanted, say, the Lower City Prayer Book, an exceedingly powerful healer trinket, you could focus on doing Alkendown dungeons, very, very simply, and gain that rep first. Then it became optional. When they brought in the 2.1 daily quests, they made them entirely optional. The reason they're there, gold, but you did not have to do them daily. The Shatari Skyguard and Ograla, and fuck this guy. I forgot how much I hated this guy. Seriously, fuck this guy. What a dick. What an absolute dick. And of course, the Netherwing reputation, all entirely optional. Now, are the quests perfect? No, but they're pretty good. Surprisingly good considering how long ago this exists. They have group quests, they have interesting quests that don't involve just grinding things, they have escort quests, they had races, certainly for the Netherwing reputation. They had rare drops like the Netherwing egg that you had to look for and find. All very cool things that were going on with these reps that basically rewarded mounts. That's it. They rewarded mounts. And in case of the Netherwing, you got a mount speed increase. Did you require these for anything? No, not at all. But what they did do was provide you with a great source of gold. Too much gold. In fact, Blizzard was a little terrified as to how much money people were going to make, and therefore they limited the amount of daily quests you could do to 10. They did not want you running around being Mr. Moneybags. Not that that matters anymore. So the TBC is going on pretty well. Daily quests are a hit, a huge hit, a big, massive hit, in fact. Therefore, they needed to do more, and they released the Sunreaver Isle. Sunreaver Isle is exceptional. It's actually so much better than what comes in the future in a lot of ways that it blows my mind and would definitely earn it a top place on this list, if you want to call it that, as being one of the better iterations. Let me explain why. Not only did it provide very high quality gear, it wasn't perfect by any means, but it had great aesthetics. Remember, this is pre-transmog, and also good designs and good stats, but it also progressed in an unlocking way. So we wouldn't really see that again until Legion, with the actual progressive unlocks of the zone. Going forward, they then made it so that if you weren't doing quests daily, of course the nerds would be out there running it daily over and over and over again. If you weren't doing that, that didn't matter. The zone would still progress, new buildings would appear, and you would get the extra daily quests allowing you to catch up. You were never that far behind, unless of course you were starting on a fresh character. The zone would grow and expand on a regular basis, regardless of whether you were farming it daily or farming it every time you could. Therefore, it made perfect sense that they tied things to the progression of the game, including the release of the epic gem recipes. A very big deal at the time, along with potions and weapon oils, which would be helpful in the Sunwell. Should also be mentioned that a dungeon and a raid came with this island. We got the Magister's Terrace, heroic only, with some extremely powerful trinkets. All in all, the progressive unlocking of the zone, which basically made the whole thing a pure circuit. So every time it added more dailies, it didn't add to your time that much. You were basically just continuing on a nice circular path all the way back round, finishing with a bombing room. It all adds up to being a really good solid zone, great PvP. PvP is a big deal to a lot of players, especially world PvP, and this gave them that opportunity to cluster all the players into one zone. TBC was still of many, many zones, and therefore having everybody in one small area meant that PvP could take off, as well as getting all these good resources. Thumbs up for the Burning Crusade. As we move into the Wrath of the Lich King, though, things start to get a little bit tricky. What Blizzard can see here is that a lot of people are doing the world quests. Some people complained about getting revered, but honestly, wasn't too bad. Wrath of the Lich King is where they started to push that envelope a bit more, and as we know, Blizzard's pride has often been a big problem. What I mean by that, of course, is that Blizzard doesn't like it too much if they make content and you don't do it. They really do not like that. Started with Naxxramas, not enough people got to see it, and by the time we hit Wrath of the Lich King, they're really starting to say, you need to do this. One of the big things most people remember about Wrath of the Lich King is, of course, the Sons of Hodir. Sons of Hodir providing the quality shoulder enchants. You either have it or you don't. Makes your character more powerful. You need to do it. And mandatory daily quests, in my eyes, are a big problem. Because every time you miss a day because you work or you have a real life, you're behind the other guy. Miss too many, you're now a week behind. Miss a couple more, you're now a month behind. Doesn't take long to be just less powerful than your friend, despite the fact that you might be clearing the same content, doing the same dungeons. Doesn't matter, you're just less powerful. And nobody likes being less powerful, especially when it's compared to their peers, the guys you play with every single day. So Wrath of the Lich King brought in these kinds of reps. But Wrath of the Lich King did something that has been sorely lost from this game. Remember, we're still linking this to reputation. You look at how many reputations exist in the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King. A lot. A lot of optional ones. It really bothers me in current World of Warcraft that seemingly when we get there, everybody's like locked into a very geographically static area and everybody cares about that thing. As soon as you cross over from the border to one line to the other, that's what they care about. That was never the case in World of Warcraft up until this kind of point. At least until Cataclysm, really. If you think about it, in Wrath of the Lich King, you've got the sort of 5 mandatory ones you're going to do. Sons of Hodir and so on and so forth. Argent Tournament, if you're into that kind of thing. Then they had a number of really optional ones. The Kalawak, for example. You don't need to do it. Rewards a fishing rod. But occasionally it's nice to try and seduce a male bull to have sex with the female bull. Entirely optional, but it's something you can do, along with cooking dailies, fishing dailies, and all those kinds of things. I'm sure many of you remember farming that meat. Tasty. And this is where they start to lose the plot a little bit. They touched into the mandatory stuff. People did it. People complained, but people did it. Wrath of the Lich King is probably the perfect example of what I would consider to be good content, particularly the Argent Tournament. Now, I know people are going to get mixed reports for this, but I went back and did the Argent Tournament. It was honestly fine. Given that the Wrath of the Lich King itself brought in some massive arrays of daily quests to do, and it's certainly with the phased unlock of zones. Remember, places like Icecrown, you had to complete the story to unlock many of the areas. Led to a lot of problems. A lot of people waiting for summons outside of ICC might not be able to see each other because of wherever they were in the story. But what they also did was provide abundance of daily quests in each and every zone. Some of them optional, some of them just for cosmetics, with some of them being more practical. As we move into Cataclysm, though, this is where it gets wonky. People had started to really complain, mainly because of the Argent Tournament, if I'm being honest, that they didn't really enjoy doing this stuff and they felt they had to do it. Remember, reputation was tied to a lot of things for the Argent Tournament. In Cata, they decided to almost dispense with this system. You look at the Cataclysm daily questing, it's not good. A lot of the stuff was tied to a lot of the stuff was tied to the tabards. Now, I know what you're thinking. The tabards were great. I agree. But let's compare it to the TBC model where you had the choice. Tabards essentially meant that you could farm a dungeon and whichever tabard you were wearing would give you rep for your chosen faction. Actually not that much different than TBC, just doing the dungeon giving you reputation. That's fine too. But they also dispensed pretty much with the daily quests. Each zone had 1 or 2, the rewards were practically useless, and not only that, they started to really water down the rewards from these. One of the curious things about Cataclysm is that earning these reputations gave you gear that was lower level than what you would get from, say, a heroic dungeon. And the main source of grinding rep was heroic dungeons. This meant people kind of lost their way a little bit. At Cataclysm overall at the launch, certainly considering they were pushing people into dungeons, especially with the tabards heavily promoting that, and them dungeons being notoriously too hard for most of the player base, led to a bit of a collapse. You can see how all these things tied together. Traditionally, if we look back at TBC, if the dungeons were too hard, say Heroic Shattered Halls, Heroic Shadow Labs, things like that, people would just go and do other content. That was always there for them. They could go and do Sporagar, or they could go and grind Talker Rep. Entirely up to those guys what they wanted to do until they were geared enough to tackle those dungeons. However, Cataclysm was kind of pushing people into the dungeons, and for a number of reasons, and that's why all the casual players were ending up in those dungeons, because grinding rep wasn't really possible outside of doing the dungeons, and doing normal mode dungeons wasn't really worthwhile at all. And not only that, the rewards are garbage, so everybody ended up in heroic dungeons just like they've been doing in Wrath of the Lich King. Unluck. Not only that, Cataclysm is where they kind of removed all the optional stuff. There's a lot of people out there who enjoy having optional grinds to do outside of doing the mandatory character required stuff. It's entirely up to you what you do with your time outside of the keep up with the power curve stuff, right? So if we look at, say, the Burning Crusade, what do I need to do outside of raid to keep up with my character progression or be with my peers? Not that much, actually. I need to have my potions and stuff prepared, and for the most part, do my quest lines. But once that's done, I can actually go and do Consortium Rep if I want to do that. I quite like what comes from there. I want that recipe for my profession, which was a great reward that a lot of the rep vendors have. I'll go that way, I'll go this way, I'll pick up a toy, and toys are very important. A lot of people find toys to be very useful. Not all of them, of course, but some of the really good ones were put inside rep vendors, and you could go and find them. Mounts were the same way, all good. Good fun stuff like having a mount speed increase like you would get from the Netherwing. Cataclysm had none of that until the Firelands. The message was received. The dungeons got changed. The message is now, we have no content to do outside of dungeons. Everything is tied to that. If I want to get my ult, I need to get my tabards, and then I need to go and get the dungeons done. I need to unlock the portals, as all of Cataclysm was done through the portal system that you'll now see in every major city. The Firelands daily quests were so well received, and I agree. Going back here was just memory lane for me. I mean, my nostalgia went through the roof as to how fun this area was. Again, picking up that theme of progressive unlocks. Now, it wasn't as involved as, say, the Burning Crusade, because it didn't have extra profession stuff or anything along those lines, or new buildings and things. You just slowly progressed through the Firelands area. But what a cool zone. Very small, very compact. Everything was done next to each other, which meant if you were short on time, you could get them done quickly. If you had longer time, it was a nice fun thing to go and do in a couple of characters. Rewarded you with good trinkets and gave you access to other areas of the game. Very, very cool. The Firelands dailies are an A+ in my eyes in terms of what they did. Bit of a negative, though, is that you had to have completed most of Mount Hyjal's story in order to access them. Something that definitely pissed off a lot of people when they were looking forward to their brand new patch content, and it was like, oh, you need to go and do Hyjal. Would Blizzard learn a lesson in making sure that everybody who had already done all the story? Yes, indeed, they would. Let's talk about Mr. Pandaria for a little bit. Mr. Pandaria was strange. Transmog is everything at this point. Everybody loves Transmog. Their casual player base, the guys who are filling the coffers with money every month, are all about Transmog. What are they not about? They're not about hard content at all. Cataclysm just proved that unquestionably. They don't want that. What they do want is stuff that they can log in, see that they can go and do, and get some cool rewards. Blizzard put out a message. In Mists of Pandaria, you're not going to be required to do dailies, but we are going to put out a lot of dailies. There's going to be so much for you to do. And guess what? The rewards are going to be transmog themed to those zones. You want to do Claxy rep? Go and do it. We're going to give you a load of Claxy themed stuff to go along with it. Hey, you want to get some of this mog? You want to get like a cool tabard with all sorts of Chinese and Eastern themed writing on it? You want to do this. You want to do that. That was good news. You know why? Because people like me, who aren't that interested in transmog, as well as many others, could go, oh, okay, what are the rewards for the Claxy rep? Don't really want that. I don't need to do the Claxy rep. Good stuff. That would have been nice, but that's not how it played out. I wonder now, looking back, whether it was a decision towards the last minute. We've seen this a lot. Is that suddenly Blizzard was afraid people aren't going to do our content. That thing comes back again. They're not going to do our content. And what did they do? They said it's all optional. They did reward transmog stuff, as well as some really cool stuff, like the ability to embed yourself in resin in order to get your mana and health back. Very good for dungeons. But what they did do was tie the Black Prince rep to the mobs that you killed for the dailies. This basically meant you would be an idiot not to do every daily all the time in order to acquire your eventual legendary cape. Every step of the way, you got a new legendary item, from a meta gem to a weapon socket, all those things. Basically, you had to do dailies. This upset a lot of people, and it's not talked about enough because Mr. Pandaria actually turned out to be one of the best expansions Blizzard ever did. But what it's not talked about enough is that the launch of Mr. Pandaria and the lead up to Mr. Pandaria was fucking atrocious. One of the worst received expansions ever, and a huge outcry from the player base at the launch of that expansion as to just how bad it was. Supremely grindy, with each daily quest rewarding very little rep. You had to grind so much, and the daily quests being very tedious, being located in very small areas which were very overcrowded all the time. Remember, this is kind of when phasing technology came in for players, is during this expansion. It was a nightmare. An absolute nightmare, and people were not happy for a long time to launch Mr. Pandaria. Mr. Pandaria is the only time I stepped back from the raiding scene. That might seem a little bit odd for someone like me, but it is. I was focusing on my YouTube channel at the time. I left Method and just decided I'm going to focus on doing what I want to do, which was not raiding and not putting up with this massive grind. However, as I just said, Mr. Pandaria turns out to be one of the best expansions ever, and one of the reasons that happened is because of world quests and daily quests. They had returned some optional stuff in fact, all of the daily quests were optional, but not optional at the same time, basically making them all mandatory. Then comes the Thunder Isle. I will sit here and I will tell you that even going back and doing the Thunder Isle now, I still had a ton of fun. The Thunder Isle, I mean, spoilers for the end of what I think is the best, is the Thunder Isle. I don't know how anybody can argue with the Thunder Isle. The Thunder Isle comes with the best daily quest zone, the best source of reputation, the best raid of all of Mr. Pandaria, and in fact I would rate it as number 2 of the best raids of all time. And it comes with a its unique scenario which can be used for farming gold, and it also has one of the best reward systems I can possibly think of. This is important. Reward system is hugely important in terms of this, because reward systems are everything. Why are people doing it? What we saw is that transmog rewards ain't no good. Only certain people like certain things. They're subjective at their best. Therefore, if you don't like them, you don't feel like you want to do them. So we had a bunch of players in Mr. Pandaria grinding a reputation, doing daily quests for something they didn't actually want. That's a big problem. That makes people frustrated and angry. What did Thunder Isle do? A lot of the rewards were tied to catch-up gear and getting your weekly bonus roll coins, which are now in there. What a wonderful idea that I can't believe didn't continue. If you were going to do older content, older LFR, older raids, they gave you an abundance of lesser coins that you could use to roll in those older dungeons. They just didn't count in the latest and greatest. Great. You only want to do the old raid a couple of times. Keeps that content relevant. Go back, get more gear than you basically have 2 goes per loot on every single boss, and then you can kit yourself out. I know I utilized it a hell of a lot, and I bet the people who played Mr. Pandaria who are listening to this also did that a hell of a lot. The scenario you could run, including getting Troves of the Thunder King, also meant that you could collect a lot of gold very easily, or you could go for the time trial and the missions, multi-purposed it. Not only that, again, that progressive unlock of the Thunder Isle. The Thunder Isle allowed you to gain more rep, which unlocked further areas of it, until it ultimately ended in a gauntlet run in order to get a big bag of rewards. It let you choose. Did you want to PvE or PvP on the zone? And you would get the same rewards whether you PvP'd or PvE'd. Great incentive for people to go down there and take part in that. It was so vast that the daily quests you got each day would take place in a totally different area. That meant they'd be very difficult to run into same old, same old. Think about the latest content that has just come out from Blizzard in terms of patch 8.3. It's either in one area or the other area, and then it's stuck that way for many days. And basically you'll go back there and have either 2 or 3 daily quests, world quests which pop up randomly, but typically they're pretty much the same. It feels monotonous the day after, and I know when you see that kill rares or collect boxes, you're already sighing. Now go back to the Thunder Isle. Go around, now you get to be a Sauroch, you can jump from cliff to cliff, now you get to be a ghost, now you get to be a dinosaur, now you get to be all these things and go into totally different areas with a totally different environment, and then go up to a gauntlet at the end. Absolutely wonderful zone, and I enjoyed going back. I did the whole zone and enjoyed every second of it as we went down there. Thunder King, Thunder Isle, perfection. Now, I'm really sorry. I'm definitely going to piss you off now. They followed that up with the Timeless Isle. I don't understand the Timeless Isle. I don't know what they were trying to achieve here, and I know many of you love the Timeless Isle. In fact, it's one of the most common things I hear. Yet you put it next to the Thunder King Island to me, with its changed story scenarios and all the stuff that came with that, and I just do not get it. I went back and did it again on the character that did it in the past. Sweet Moses, that place is boring. I do not get it at all, and I struggle. So I'm going to give it a negative sort of overview here. Yeah, I think many of you, and I know, in fact, I know many of you love the Timeless Isle. Now, it did come with some good stuff. Undasta came with that. The first big, mega outdoor raid we'd had in so long. So laggy, so fun. Everything we thought about World of Warcraft came back to our hands with Undasta. It did come with the legendary capes. Cool. Came with some pet battle dailies, collect some coins, but basically the whole zone is just a grind fest. Just run around, just grinding mobs over and over again, getting some loot and transmogging coins and turning them in. I can't put that side by side with what I enjoy, so I'm just going to skip over it and say, not for me, but I understood people love it. I also want to come back here and talk about Half Hill. Mr. Pandaria introduced Half Hill. I will be the first to say that when Half Hill and creating your own little farm, I was one of the first people to mock it. I apologize profusely. Because towards the end of Mr. Pandaria, while preparing my Warlords of Draenor character, which would be my rogue, once I decided on that, I decided I wanted to do everything Mr. Pandaria had to offer, including the optional dailies. Am I so glad I got that Water Strider when I did? Thumbs up for me. Again, entirely optional, but God, that was worth. I decided to do Half Hill, and I had one of the most enjoyable weeks of my entire life in Mr. Pandaria, sorting out my farm, doing the story, unlocking all the extra areas, finding the hidden jewels. Such a good piece of content that I'm sad never continued on. It could still be useful to this day. I have no idea why that content is dead. I loved it so much. One of the big feathers in the cap for me of Mr. Pandaria in terms of its daily, repeatable, and reputation gains was that. Not only did it give all the cooking recipes, but it got you caught up in lots of ways. Such a wonderful piece of content. Rest in peace, my friend. I think you were really good. Timeless Isle still sucked, though. I don't care. It's terrible. Let's go to Warlords of Draenor. You know what? WoD is where my mind changes a lot, because WoD has Tanaan Jungle. We're going to get to Tanaan Jungle. Starting out in WoD, what did we get? A lot, actually. A lot of cool stuff, depending on what you built in your garrison. Of course, Warlords of Draenor was when Blizzard heard that people wanted convenience. A lot of convenience. Quality of life was the phrase going into Warlords of Draenor. And quality of life, and to Blizzard's credit, is exactly what they gave us. Just a little too well. They gave us everything without ever having to step foot anywhere else in the world. And the problem was, what they had out in the rest of the world was pretty crap. Everything was done in the first week, including the Savior Society, which was collecting tokens and turn them in. We kind of reverted back to that almost classic style, which I think some people thought was good, and it wasn't. And then we had Apexis crystals. I remember coming into one and thinking, what is my daily stuff? So I unlocked the building that gave me dungeon dailies. As somebody who PvEs a lot, made sense to me. And I had fun with that. I got toys from that, gave me incentive to go and do daily quests in those dungeons, similar to what they did in Wrath of the Lich King with releasing daily quests, and in Mr. Pandaria with daily heroic scenarios. It gave me that kind of content that I enjoyed to do, and I knew most of my guild would be doing, so I could pair up with friends. Good system. So that worked well for me. The daily quest to go and do the Apexis zones, though. What the hell happened here? I know what they were going for. In the Burning Crusade, in order to achieve higher level materials, they simply built areas that were inaccessible by lower level players. How? Not everybody had flying. You got flying when you basically capped. Therefore, what they could do was put higher level areas, including massive elementals, Elemental Plateau, for example, high up so that people on ground mounts simply couldn't get there. That made a lot of sense. And they tried to return to that. They created these locked off areas that you had no reason to go to if you were leveling or doing anything like that, where they put all these elites in all these high level areas. The problem, of course, they weren't that fun. I'll be honest with you guys, I forgot these even existed until I went back and started doing some Warlords of Draenor dailies. And then it all came flooding back to me that I would fly down, I would find a group for it, and I would fill the bar. Warlords of Draenor is where the fill the bar comes from. Warlords of Draenor contained all those bonus objectives that you could do while leveling. Great piece of content, wonderful extra bonus to amount of XP that you got. Good stuff. Destroyed immediately after that expansion, which is really sad. They also gave us those wonderful in-zone uses. You might have forgotten them, but Guardian Orbs and summoning troops. Things like that were different depending on which zone you were in. But it didn't change the fact that these daily quests were just fill the bar. Grind the mobs, bar is full. Now, I'll tell you, this is the interesting thing. So, Warlords of Draenor, certainly at the start, was bad, but they had a chance to redeem it with Tanaan Jungle. Interestingly enough, the garrison contained the follower table. And I forgot how much cool stuff was on the follower table. So much cool stuff that I compare it to my BFA one, and it's almost laughable. I actually very much enjoyed Warlords of Draenor, filling up my characters, getting them as geared as possible. I used to have the management system that was producing all the equipment for them so I could get them all leveled up and do all that kind of stuff. It was a great thing, finding all the followers and then getting them kitted up so I could use them in my missions. Tanaan Jungle presented Blizzard with a big problem. They would run out of rewards to give. They were giving so many rewards for so many things that they were now struggling to find what is a good reason to do this content. I hated Tanaan Jungle. I made a video during the PTR of Tanaan Jungle explaining it's boring. But a lot of that video, now I go look at it, is focused on the resources. Because it's also the patch that brought with it the Naval Yard. Now, if you never played Warlords of Draenor, you won't know what the Naval Yard is. But let me tell you, it's not very good. Sending out boats, equipping boats. It was separate from the garrison, which made it really tedious to get to because we didn't get flying until quite much later in Warlords of Draenor. Eventually, they put a little teleporter in, a little Hearthstone that took you down there, and able to send these missions off from your normal garrison because it was really tedious. And one of the rewards they gave for Tanaan Jungle were Apexis crystals, which was a huge joke at the time because it's basically everything people have been farming since day one of WoD, and oil. Oil in order to be doing new mission table stuff, which people had also been doing since day one. The reward structure of Tanaan Jungle is fucking terrible. Tanaan Jungle is not bad though, and I feel bad now about how much I berated it, because I berated it, but I did berate it for the right reasons. The reward structure is awful. It's absolutely terrible. The zone itself is really not bad. It's not. It's got its problems. It's not great. Let me be clear on this. It's not great. There are areas between shit and amazing. There's a place in the middle there. It's not bad, though. It is plagued by Fill the Bar. You go down there and you immediately get a Fill the Bar quest. And I remember that getting that Fill the Bar quest made me sick to my stomach because that's all they presented us in WoD since day one. Blizzard really struggling at this point to find a good repeatable content source, while similarly having no rewards to give. So what they decided to do in Tanaan Jungle was promote a lot of toys. Now, they did do some cool stuff, including the King of the Jungle focus, which I actually thought was really nice. I think it's Chattanooga it was called, or something like that, Tiger-Nooga. That was really quite interesting. But they just run out of stuff to give, and this brings up the question of rewards. And also at this point, we're completely dead, pretty much, of all optional reputations. Now we're really starting to streamline as much as possible. It comes with that quality of life aspect. We're trying to streamline everything. No one's extra. Every zone has its own specific purpose, its own specific goal, and anything outside of that is completely ineffective. The people in one zone have no idea what's going on in another zone. The Grand doesn't care what Frostfire Ridge is doing. Everyone lives in their own little bubble. WoD's a failure. Tanaan Jungle, I'm sure many people actually really liked it. I'm sure they did, and they should have. It's really not that bad. It really isn't. Great, it is not. Let's go to Legion then. So in Legion, world quests. We get world quests. So up until this point, it's been entirely the daily quest focus. That's what we've had. But now we've got world quests. World quests are pretty goddamn cool. However, we're now totally dead with anything optional. Everything's really encased in its own little bubble, completely its own biosphere. As soon as you cross over the river, nobody gives a shit about what's happening in Val Shara compared to the next zone. Nobody cares. And it's all pretty much mandatory. Why? They provide these wonderful things. You would be a moron not to do these, not to get your rep up as much as possible to claim the rewards from them. Basically, Legion is the real turning point where daily quests went from Warlords of Draenor, where they were practically just completely irrelevant, and then in Legion, they were everything. It's only that short of a time distance, so they become everything. But now, reputation as a consideration of a separate entity is also gone. So the reputation guys who just like completing stuff entirely on their own back, whether it takes them weeks or days, depending entirely when they have some free time to play, are now shit out of luck. That's all gone, because everybody's doing everything. We're now talking about world quest sweeps, doing the whole thing. And to be fair, they're pretty good. They're decently rewarding, they give you good gear, and also relics, great for your artifact weapon. Always nice to get relics. And of course, we've got Warforged Titan Forging going on. Not as bad as it happens in BFA. Still going on. Arcana Crystal. We've still got all these things happening, but for the most part, they're pretty rewarding and pretty good. Two problems now, though. It's been a long time since gold has been relevant. This is one of the reasons that in Warlords of Draenor, Blizzard's really struggling to give rewards. Remember, when this system came into the game, it was about the gold for a lot of people. That's now dead. Totally gone. The gold doesn't really matter to many people. Certainly not day-to-day gold. You might not be a millionaire, but you probably can repair your gear. So it's a long way from when the system first came in. And now rep has gone as a factor of meaningful investment, doing something somebody else hasn't done, right? That's also gone. Now we're looking at a lot of players who are like, what are we going to do here? Blizzard's also looking, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do here? So they come up with all kinds of different rewards, including the legendary system, of course, which definitely props up the World Quest system. I will say that. It props up the World Quest system. Is it perfect? No, but it's varied enough. In one zone, you're doing one thing. In one zone, you're doing another. They added some extra ones in, and it also enabled them to reuse some of their quests from leveling up. Overall, World Quest, very well received compared to the daily quest system, especially as it comes after Warlords of Draenor, which, for the most part, has been considered a pretty much a fucking disaster. Therefore, it's in a good light, right? It's doing really well. Then they have a chance to step it up a bit. Legion Fall. We all remember Legion Fall. Going down to the Isle. Good job. Really good job. Going back down there today was really fun. Quests were super short, super efficient. Brought the Mage Tower with it. Really good stuff. Legion is on a good roll of content. Until Argus. Going back to Argus was an eye-opener of a nostalgia thing. I didn't like Argus from initially. I think Argus came with so much expectations. But what did they really give us? More of the same. But now we're back to grinding crystals again. We're back to that Warlords of Draenor feeling with the Argonite crystals. We're now grinding crystals to buy things from a vendor, and now it's pure RNG. It's what we want to get the Arcano crystal. We want to get this and that from the trinket vendor, but it's just not really happening. We want relinquished stuff. And then it all has a sour taste because you grind for a while, you don't get anything, and then it's this. The quest and the gameplay, similar to Tanaan Jungle. I wish I could actually compare Argus to Tanaan Jungle. It's good. It's all right. It's not great. It's got the invasions. It's got that kind of stuff, which is nice. It's not amazing. It's not amazing. It's got progressive unlocks, but it's time-gated. It's not player-gated like the Thunder Isle is. Now it's based on when they decide to continue the story and the ship can be asked moving over to there. Suddenly it can do it. Last week it couldn't. That kind of stuff. And people are starting to get a little bit like, this is just being spread really thin. Really thin. Instead of us having an influence on it, it's just Blizzard deciding when it should happen. Little bit grim. So August, a bit of a drop-off in nature. And then we get to BFA, where there's shit outlook. We all know about the BFA World Quest. They lost the legendary backup system. There's basically no rewards left, and everything is mandatory. Everything is mandatory, pretty much. If you want to do stuff, you need to get the rep to do it, and they don't have it character bound. So if you want to unlock Iron Dwarves, or whatever it might be, you're going to have to grind it. You want to get your neck upgraded, you're going to have to do champions. If you want to do this, you want to do that, you're going to have to grind Zandalar, or you're going to have to do the story anyway to fly. You're going to have to do all those things. Everything falls into this mandatory bubble of shit. So overall, I think it should be pretty clear for you to see that the Thunder Isle, perfection! Absolute perfection. The Thunder Isle is so good. There's so much effort's gone into it that when you compare it side by side, especially if you do these, and I recommend you go and do them in some progressive order, you'll realize just how good some of these things are compared to what they are. But compared to what we've had later. If you compare 8.3 to like the Thunder King Isle, or compare it to even Tanaan Jungle, which has a wealth of toys, multiple factions, has a big, solid, excellent world boss. Doomlord Kazakh was there, for God's sake. You go compare it to that and you'll kind of go, world boss that falls over by tickling it. 4 or 5 quests I'm doing in 10 minutes, which is nice because I don't want to spend too much time there. Whereas if I compare it to the Thunder King, I wanted to spend time there. It was fun. It was cool. It was varied. It was interesting. I could use near enough every single reward I can get from there. But most of the time it's coming down to war resources, or it's coming down to gold, or it's coming down to low-level gear I don't need, or it's coming down to horrific visions, which have a limited lifespan in and to themselves. And this is what I think is very important for Shadowlands, that we can learn going forward. One, world quests are a huge deal. They're not going away. They're going to do something cool with them. But they have to be planned with time in mind. They have to be planned to be done again and again. And that's the point of having it progressively unlock naturally per character, having that be a fun unlock, keeping it varied, and also adding in the fun stuff. 8.3 is like patch 1 of the Thunder Isle. I know I'm comparing a lot to the Thunder Isle, and other zones did do something similar, but I think you get the idea that I'm coming from here if I just keep with this one zone. 8.3 has everything on day 1. You have everything. And literally, the opening quest line introduces you to everything you will see forever. And then it's done. Now, it is a lengthy quest line, which a lot of people complain about. And that would have been much better if it was built up to that. If it was built up to progressively unlocking what is going on with the corruption. The corruption could have spread. It could have done other things, as we saw in the other zones. Instead, what we get in 8.3 is a huge big quest line, which I think is very good. But that's it. You literally have seen every single aspect of it all. And the only thing that's going to change is whether or not it's on the left-hand side of the veil or the right-hand side of the veil. That's it. And you get the new raid. We didn't get a new dungeon. That's it. Whereas you look at the other zones that took months to unlock, like the Sunreaver Isle, like the Thunder Isle, and every single step of it progressed you to something there. And all of it was locked behind something worth getting, like jewel crafting recipes, right? That weren't need them on the spot because we weren't getting all the gems yet. But we knew that if we do it side by side within the raid and outside of the raid, eventually we'd have those things. And even if I do not have the time to commit like the nerds do, I don't rage, which is a big problem a lot of players has right now. That guy's exalted. I'm not exalted. And rightfully so, because a lot of those guys don't have the time to play. You look at something like the Sunreaver Isle, didn't matter. Those nerds were actually grinding for you, because when those vendors became open, you got access regardless of if you'd done the dailies or not. Didn't matter. You could go and get them anyway, as long as you did a little bit for the rep. But as long as you were okay, you get my point. You didn't need to grind all over and over again in order to go and get those things. There were also lots of optional things. So in Shadowlands, I would love to see optional things back. Reputation is a good gameplay element. And it should contain good stuff that you want to go and get. But it should also be optional. I have personal goals outside of raiding. I used to love doing the Kalawak fishing derby on a Saturday. I used to love going down and getting my fishing rod. Did I need a better fishing rod? Of course not, but it was cool. And I wanted to go and get it. When at the time I wanted the water strider, many people didn't have it. I just wanted to have it. It sounded fun. Sounded not that useful in Mr. Pandaria, but I wanted it anyway, because it could be useful sometimes. That's enough reason for me to go and do it in my optional time. And if I miss a few days, doesn't matter. I don't mandatorily need to keep up to it because it's not my power character power that is increasing with it. My ability to walk on water with a mount doesn't make the raid go better or my PvP go better or any of those things. Totally fine. So in Shadowlands, I would really like it if everybody wasn't in their own separate biosphere. There are people who don't care about what's happening in the grand scheme of things. Let's address those people. What are those people up to? They have their own individual problems that maybe we can go and help with. Doesn't need to contribute to the overall effort of what's happening. We're in this shadow upside down realm of death and hell. There's bound to be lots of things happening there that we want to know about that are separate from our overarching goal with Sylvanas, right? That's bound to be happening. Let's see more of that. Let's also consider having the ability to have all the major rewards a bit lower down. Exalted is fine and all. It makes your bar look pretty on your character pane, but it doesn't need to be the be-all and end-all. 8.3's done a good job of that, and I think that's where they're moving towards, and I hope they do that. Getting Exalted is good for some, not for others. That's fine. That's totally fine. That's absolutely fine. We can go to that and make it work. There are some mixtures to do here, but please plan for the entire patch. It was so cool going back and doing stuff and getting tokens that made sense in slightly older content. People loved getting those tokens. That's a great loot system because it doesn't matter about building a reward structure for that patch only, because the reward structure just filters into other parts of the game. Your reward structure is actually very simple because it filters elsewhere. It's not the be-all and end-all. I don't get all my gear from here like we had with Najata. I get all my Benthic gear here, and then I go to Mechagon to get the other pieces. It's all structured here. Previously, the daily quests and world quests structured it so that this enabled you to get stuff elsewhere, and then the game starts crossing over and do all kinds of things. Those are what I'm looking for in Shadowlands. I'd love to know, what is your favourite world quest zone? You're going to say the Timeless Isle, aren't you? I'm sorry, I just don't like it. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.